Obtain the offer you deserve. Offer evaluation and negotiation best practices. My name is Dana Day, and I am the Manager of Member Relations here at APICS. Before we begin, I'd like to run through a few details. The presentation is being recorded and will be available at apics.org/careercoach. At the end of the presentation, we will have time for a question and answer session. If you look at the toolbar on your screen, you'll see a questions box. To ask your question at any time during the presentation, simply type it in the box and click send. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker, Rodney Apple. Rodney is the founder and president of SCM Talent Group, LLC, a national supply chain recruiting and executive search firm that recruits across the end-to-end supply chain discipline. Rodney has been working in professional recruiting for many years and has a wealth of knowledge and experiences that he generously shares as our own APICS career coach. Everyone, please give a warm welcome to Rodney Apple. Rodney, you may begin.
Thank you very much, Dana, and thanks to everyone that has joined the webinar today. I'm excited about this topic. I know it's a delicate topic for many people, and it can be a very anxious topic as well. So we're going to go through how to prepare and evaluate and negotiate an offer and set you up for success. So quick agenda, we're going to cover some basics, how companies' compensation practices differ from small, mid-sized companies to large companies, how to address that awkward question around your current and desired salary, tips for evaluating and negotiating a job offer, how to deal with counteroffers, and then just some final thoughts and takeaways. And after that, we'll get into a Q&A discussion. Quick introduction. Again, Rodney Apple, founder of SCM Talent Group. I've been recruiting for over 20 years, split between corporate recruiting for some pretty large companies that include Home Depot for about 3 years, Coca-Cola for 6.5, Kimberly-Clark, Cummins, and a few others. I've been exclusively focused in end-to-end supply chain recruitment for going on 20 years. We cover a lot of different practice areas, from supply chain management to logistics, sourcing and procurement, supply chain planning. We do a lot in the manufacturing space, as well as quality and continuous improvement. Mainly do executive retained search. We also offer contingency search services, contract staffing, interim executives, and then we work with a lot of different industries, mainly companies that do manufacturing, retail, wholesale, and then supply chain service providers. So I've got a pretty good perspective on compensation practices, having worked in different corporate settings on the inside, have processed over 1,000 different offers during that time frame, have done everything from, obviously new hire compensation to internal, promotions, demotions, lateral moves, pretty much seen it all. And then I've had even a broader perspective on the agency side, working with a ton of companies ranging from startups to large Fortune 500 corporations. If we're not connected, please send me an invite. Easy to find on LinkedIn. I have a very unique last name, Rodney Apple. You can send me an email through the email address there, and then we're also very active on Twitter with sharing content as well. If you'd like to access our past Career Coach webinars, as well as the white papers that we've developed, I'm into year 5 as the APICS Career Coach. We've got a lot of good content that's at the following address, apics.org/careercoach. If you get access to the magazine, which if you're a member of APICS, you should be getting those in the mail. You can also find the digital copy online at the APICS website. I've been putting out a lot of good content there. Same umbrella, professional development, and so there's another way to access some of the content that we developed for APICS. Now, with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to talk about compensation basics to begin with. The role of compensation within any company is, kind of 3 things here. They're the ones, whoever sets the compensation, it's going to differ by company size, but you're basically determining and maintaining the pay level guidelines. How you bring people into a company, where you set the compensation based on job level, the type of function the person is managing, and so forth. The goal is to make sure that the compensation plan attracts talent, it motivates talent to hit performance objectives, rewards your employees for achieving those objectives, both at the individual level and oftentimes at the company level, and also to retain employees. And then lastly, you want to make sure you're controlling payroll costs. If you're bringing everybody in at the top of the range, you're going to have probably going to have a visitation from your CFO or someone in finance. We're going to talk about compensation. It varies tremendously, by company, and especially company size. Large employers will have a more formalized process. They'll oftentimes have a compensation expert or a full department, depending on the size of the company. Mid-sized employers, they're going to differ probably the most. They'll have some type of formal compensation structure. It probably won't be as formal or rigid as some of the large public corporations. And then with your startups and small employers, they run a full gamut there, typically a lot less rigid, a lot less formal. And also compensation obviously varies by job level. If you've got, from the non-exempt level support type roles all the way through to your executive compensation, there's a whole lot of variance depending on job level. So I like to break things down into, when you look at a compensation package, everybody thinks about, salary, of course, is usually the most important, and then of course your other cash components. Then you also have your non-cash components that can consist of healthcare benefits and so forth. So obviously base salaries typically, you have to have a certain amount of money to survive and also to help grow your wealth and put yourself in a position to be able to invest your money and hit your retirement goals. Part of that is oftentimes structured with a short-term incentive that's typically your annual bonus. And if you're in sales, you may have some kind of commission package. Sometimes sign-on bonuses are offered. Discretionary bonuses can be offered if there's not a certain target percentage. You've also got your long-term incentives. So short-term versus long-term, pretty straightforward. Short-term is usually, your performance is measured over a short-term, so such as 1 year, and then the long-term is over multiple years, which can range anywhere from 2, 3, 4, 5 years in terms of a vesting schedule. We'll get into this in just a little bit in terms of more detail on how short-term incentives, long-term incentives are structured. Then you've got your non-cash components, and these are very important, especially in today's healthcare climate. It can be very expensive to maintain your medical, especially if you have a family, and if you have any kind of healthcare issues, it can be super expensive. So that's always typically a very important component of an offer package. You have life and disability insurance that's oftentimes provided. Retirement plans, some companies do not offer them. Some companies offer very extensive plans that include a pension. You don't see the pension as much anymore these days, but it's still provided in certain companies. Typically see some kind of a 401k or simple IRA plan. You've got your vacation, paid time off, PTO, and other things that can include car allowances, phone allowances, your membership to a gym. Some companies provide meals, child care assistance, tuition reimbursement. And there's also, I didn't put this on there, but relocation packages can be a pretty lucrative part of an offer package, especially if they take care of marketing your home and paying down your closing costs and things of that nature. Typically, what you'll find, especially in more structured compensation environments, they'll break things down by a job family. So your traditional business disciplines, marketing, sales, IT, HR, supply chain, finance, and so forth. From there, you'll have what I would call more of a sub-function, if you will. Obviously, like within finance, you've got people that work on the accounting side. You've got people that work in controlling, financial analysts. Same thing with HR. You've got generalists, compensation specialists, benefits administrators, and so forth. The exact same thing applies to supply chain. And so you'll typically find the overarching job family, and under that, there's different areas that people work in, different departments, if you will. Can consist of logistics, people that work in the procurement function, planning, customer service, and so forth. You also break things down by the job level or categories. So there'll be a bucket of employees that fall into the support. Oftentimes, this could be the largest number of employees in a company, especially if you have operations. Think of Amazon with all their fulfillment centers. Most people fall into this bucket. You've got your professional hires. Oftentimes, these are individual contributors, subject matter experts. Then you've got your management ranks that are managing others. And then obviously above that, you've got your key executives or officers. And compensation will vary by each of these categories in terms of the structure of the package. And then you have job grades, and you'll see these. They basically are grouped by the worth or value that the company feels that folks bring to the table. And those grades, just depending on the company, they can vary, but it's basically just moves up a notch from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. You'll find higher compensation, as well as other types of incentives that are oftentimes provided with key employees. In any salary range, you're going to have the minimum salary and the maximum. And in the middle right there is the midpoint. What I have found over the years is that companies will typically bring people in, obviously within that range, and every company has a different philosophy on how they bring new people into a position. Very rare that you're going to come in at the maximum. There's going to be isolated cases. We'll get into this in a bit. Most companies strive to bring people in, somewhere between 25% of the range and 75% of the range. That can be a pretty broad range depending on the job level, but that's typically what you'll find in most compensation structures. Peer equity, want to spend some time talking about this because you may not be familiar with this term, but it's basically it's looking at those job families, functions against the pay grades as you bring in talent. Most companies strive to keep people doing the same work in the same function at the same level within the same ranges. And where companies get into a lot of trouble, and I've seen this before with past employers that I've actually worked with, from lawsuits to gets into pay discrimination. I've seen a lot of bad things happen when companies don't have a good compensation practice or when they start taking shortcuts. So ensuring fairness with pay is the number one goal here. You want to mitigate any kind of employee morale issues. You certainly want to cut down on any complaints, especially if it gets escalated to the EEOC or Department of Labor. And obviously lawsuits is definitely something that companies want to avoid. You hear about the pay gender gap. This is what this applies to, where companies have practices in place. You call it the good old boy network, whatever leads to unfair practices based on gender. I've seen it on the racial side, and I've seen discrimination lawsuits as a result. So this is another reason why you want to have very fair and formal compensation packages, because the moment you have people at the same level doing the same work and there's a high degree of variance, they start talking around the water cooler, that's when you're going to get into trouble. And also with the peer equity too, I know when I worked in the corporate side, Coke, Home Depot, et cetera, we had compensation. The experts there would give us the ranges. They would also give us the ranges for not just the ranges, but what actual employees are making. Say there's 12 people that work in supply chain on the procurement side. So you would have, at grade 10, you would have the minimum paid salary, and you'd have the maximum, and then you'd have the medium number as well. When we want to make sure when we're bringing in candidates, we're looking at the peer salary data. It's an important data point to make sure that we're not bringing in people too low or too high, that everybody's sort of, not on the exact same pages. You're never going to have everybody at the exact same salary, but it's important to make sure people are not too far off. You don't have any major discrepancies. And then it's the way salaries are administrated. Obviously, when you hire someone new coming into the company, there's a different process there than it would be an annual merit increase. Those merit increases sometimes can range from 2 to 4%. Typically in the corporate days, on average, when we bring someone into a new position, a new hire, it would oftentimes average, I'd say, between 10% increase and 15% increase over their current compensation. And then you've got situations where you've got people that are getting promoted through the ranks, and then those can vary in terms of the increase amount. And then, on the other side of that coin, you've got folks that aren't hitting their performance. So sometimes people get demoted, and then also people make lateral moves. Lateral moves, that's no sign of performance issues. Sometimes people do that to broaden their experience. Sometimes that comes with an increase. Oftentimes it does not. So those are the 4 different ways that salary can be administrated within a company. All right. So now we're going to talk about how employers, how they oftentimes calculate starting salary. And again, this is going to vary by, small to mid-sized to large corporations. What you'll typically find in a small business or a startup, they're going to have that higher degree of compensation flexibility. They may not have a very formal range. Sometimes it comes off the top of someone's head, or what they might have budgeted for the position, right? You've got oftentimes the most senior leader in the company, whether it's the president or CEO or the owner, is typically going to dictate or make the final say. Sometimes if they have an HR person, that person will help keep track of compensation as well. And this is just where you're probably going to find the most degree of flexibility with negotiating, terms and so forth. When you get into your mid-sized companies, they typically will have an HR person. There's going to be a bit more formal compensation structure. May not have a compensation expert, but there's plenty of companies like Hayes, for example, that you can go to on the consulting side if you want to outsource and to a company that can do benchmarking against your competitors, your peer companies, to help come up with your salary and compensation structure. And you'll find a little bit more leeway within mid-sized companies than you will oftentimes within large corporations. And having worked in some large corporations, every single one that I worked with had compensation expert, typically a small department. These folks are highly specialized. It's a lot of math, algorithms, a lot of data analysis, and they are the ones that guide the ship. They also handle everything from your entry level up to your CEO compensation level. So a lot of benchmarking goes on. They're always wanting to make sure they maintain their whatever degree of competitiveness they need to within their industry or market segment. You'll find it's very structured. I know every time I developed an offer inside of the companies I worked at, again, Coke, Home Depot, Kimberly-Clark, we oftentimes had a spreadsheet that would help us, look at the peer equity for the job family and the job function and the pay grade. So we'd have some pretty rich data, and we were given leeway too to bring people in at certain offers. Where we would have to go to get approval would be anytime there's anomaly where someone needs to come in above the range or even below the range. We'd have to go seek approval, or if there's any kind of sign-on bonus or something outside of the norm, if you will. You'll rarely find that you can negotiate things like your short-term incentive, long-term incentive. So typically salary is negotiable, and these are the differences you'll find, when companies bring people in based on company size. Now, when I'm sure anyone that's interviewed for any position, you're going to get that question about current salary and desired salary, and a lot has changed here in recent years. We'll get into that in a bit with legislation in certain cities, in certain states, where employers are no longer allowed to ask questions about current salary, and the goal there really is just they've got the data. They know that there's some discrepancies, mainly on the gender side, sometimes on the racial side as well. So the goal here is really to try to stamp that out and make sure that there's equal pay for really everyone coming into the company. But typically, when a company asks you your current salary, okay, there's really only two goals here. They're trying to figure out, are you in their range or not? And I would say most employers are striving to find out, are you in the range? Because there's really no point in bringing somebody through the interview process if you cannot afford that person. You're wasting time, you're creating a negative candidate experience, and you're absolutely going to frustrate the hiring managers as well. So most of the time when they ask that question, they're really just wanting to find out, are you in the range, right? The other reason is they want to find out how cheap can we get you. Now, in my experience, I have seen plenty of both. I have seen we've worked with companies, we no longer work with those companies, but we've worked with companies that did not play fair. They asked us to go out and get the current compensation. We'd submit them at their desired compensation, and we'd get them through the process. They put the sales spin on, and then at the 11th hour, everybody's getting to the altar to propose, and they come in short. And they only do that to try to save money or to see if you will accept at that number. And oftentimes they'll have a backup plan. Okay, well, if we can't get them at this number, then sure, let's go ahead and bring them in where they want to. So I've seen plenty of that. So we're going to talk about techniques for addressing that question as a candidate. Number one, you always want to be prepared in advance of any salary discussion. So if you have a recruiter call you up about a position, they start asking questions around your compensation, you want to be prepared. And what that means is you absolutely need to understand your worth for the type of position that you're pursuing, as well as your current. What am I worth in the marketplace? And the most effective way to do that is to research, online research, conduct, looking at salary surveys. There's plenty of online sites like PayScale. You've got Glassdoor, Salary.com. There's several out there that they basically do the same. Now, is their data the same across all of these sites? No, they use different mechanisms for obtaining the data. What I have found in supply chain in particular is that sometimes the salary survey data seems to be outdated with what's going on in the real world in real time. And so you have to bear that in mind as well. And so there are some sites too that do crowdsourcing and Glassdoor, sometimes you can get better real-time data there. I know Indeed has a salary calculator that's based on what companies are putting in for salary ranges when they post jobs. Seems to be a little bit more accurate. But best thing to do is to look at the salary surveys, put them in a spreadsheet, and try to figure out, okay, what's the best data point that you're seeing. You can also survey peers that work in the same profession. You might even want to talk to people that have worked in the same job at the same company. Maybe that you're exploring that has moved on. Maybe they could give you some insight. Those are just a few different techniques for trying to figure out your worth and what people are typically making within your industry or within the same position that you're striving for. I strongly recommend that until you fully understand the position, that you don't get into salary discussions. And I think it's very fair if someone says, what are you looking for? Well, I don't even understand what you need in this role. So make sure that you fully understand the role before you address the question. And ideally, if you can ask for the salary range before they ask you what you're looking for, that's always ideal. That way you can determine, yeah, absolutely, I fit into that range or not. A salary is just one piece. It's usually the most important piece of the compensation package, but you also need to understand what other variables are important to you. And if you have a family and healthcare costs are rising, you absolutely need to understand what those benefits, what the costs are going to be for you and your family if you were to take that position. So try to understand what the other perks are. They could have some incredible perks like allowing a sabbatical for 3 months. What is that worth to you? So get to understand these things before answering the question. If you are pressed, try not to give a number. You don't want to provide a hard number. You want to show a degree of flexibility. So providing a range is always best. And ultimately, if you are getting pressed to provide a number, you're not comfortable, they're not giving you any other information. I mean, this needs to be a mutual two-way discussion. So if they're not giving you any insights and they just want to press you for that number, you you need to determine if you feel like you're going to be getting lowballed. Do you give in the information, or do you walk away? So speaking of the new legislation in the state of California, Delaware, Massachusetts, and then the city of Philadelphia, as well as Puerto Rico, New York City, employers are not allowed to ask about your current compensation. It's illegal to do so right now, and I know a lot of other cities and states are looking into this legislation as well. The experts agree that there's going to be more of this around the country, and before long, this could be a question that is forbid across the country to ask by any employer. So what do you do if you're in one of these areas where it's illegal? Obviously there's two things you can do. You can remind the person they're not allowed to ask that, and that they cannot make any decisions based on you not answering that question. And obviously if they do, and if you feel like you're being adversely impacted, you can certainly file a complaint. And so that could include escalating it up to, seeking, help from a lawyer. So those are the things that can happen. So I think a lot of companies are taking this very, very seriously. Even here at our firm, on our phone screen form, I have in big red letters, just like you see right there, do not ask the current compensation question. A lot of times, the way we do it, at least, we like to just understand, and we're in the middle here. We have no motivation to lowball anyone. Honestly, the higher the compensation, the higher our fee. So there's zero motivation for search firms to lowball anyone. And typically, what we'll want to do is simply understand: does this person fit into the salary range? And is their desired comp in the same ballpark as well? So the way we have addressed this, and I think this is what most recruiters are doing, is really just trying to understand the desired comp. But we also need to understand, do you have a bonus? That's a yes or no question. When does it pay out? Is there a long-term equity package included? And without getting any numbers, just so we understand the structure of their package. Because we need to be able to compare and contrast that to the opening that we are reaching out to you for. So it's okay to communicate those things, not okay to communicate anything on current salary, the actual number, and so forth. Now, as far as my history goes, again, extensive experience on the inside of some large corporations. I do feel like most companies are playing fair. They want to bring you in at a good compensation level. So you just have those isolated situations where there are companies out there that do have a practice of lowballing. And at the end of the day, you have to do your due diligence. You have to prepare in advance. And if you don't have a good intuition that they're leading the conversation in the right way, trying to do the right thing, then you're going to have to make that judgment call. Is this the kind of company that you'd like to work for? All right, moving on. Evaluating a job offer, and we just put out a blog post last week on this topic. But first and foremost, you absolutely want to understand your financial baseline. That's going to involve potentially going through a budgeting exercise. Understanding what it really takes for you to survive, not only survive, but really thrive and maintain your lifestyle. So, run some analysis, figure out what is that minimum compensation number that I'm going to need, to make a move. And understand that if you settle for anything else, it can be risky. Hopefully, we're not living paycheck to paycheck, but if you've got debt, you've got college loans to pay off, you're going to put yourself at a disadvantage if you accept anything below your baseline. So make sure you understand what that baseline is, and make sure there's enough cushion in there as well to allow you to, build up a nest egg, but also to invest and, again, hit your retirement goals. Now, the only exception, if you are financially secure and there's a significant upside, perhaps it's a hot startup, it's a high growth opportunity, you're getting in on the ground floor of of a company that's going to do major things. So you have to weigh that out as well. From there, again, you want to research and understand the marketplace. And again, looking at the salary calculator sites, understanding the different ranges that companies are paying for talent, like you, but also for the positions that you're vying for. You need to understand that. And again, I'd recommend looking at all of these different sites. Take the time and put everything in a spreadsheet, run some analysis, and try to figure out what the real range looks like. If you're moving somewhere, obviously all cities are not equal. If you're going from, call it Albany, Georgia, up to New York City or out to San Francisco, you can expect 30, 40% higher cost of living. So you absolutely want to understand, how compensation ranges differ and how cost of living ranges differ city by city. And there's plenty of sites out there that run that analysis for you as well. From here, you've got a job offer. Very exciting. Typically, you're going to be given a deadline. You don't ever want to rush into any type of decision. You always want to make sure you take the time to analyze the offer detail. That doesn't mean just looking at the salary or the bonus. You've got to understand all the other attributes that we talked about early on with your cash and non-cash compensation variables. And when you're looking at the opportunity, never just look at the salary. Look at these things should be obvious, but I'm going to go through them anyway. Does the work that you're going to do, is it work that you actually enjoy? You certainly don't want to get to a situation you've got this awesome offer, but the work is not what you like doing. So you absolutely have to check that box. Is the culture, work environment, is that something that I can thrive in? That has to check the box too, because you don't want to get yourself into a horrible work environment and find yourself immediately looking for another opportunity. Then you're going to have some short job stints that you're going to have to explain down the road to a future employer. Very critical that you work for someone that you respect. It's a good leader, so you want to make sure you're assessing that person, that boss that you're going to be reporting into. That person can hold the keys to your future promotions and so forth. Benefits are, as we mentioned, are very important, so you need to make sure that they are reasonable. And ultimately, how is this position going to impact my career? Is it going to increase my knowledge, skills, experience, and ultimately my marketability? And as you can see, the last two questions I put in red because I think they're, from a wealth generation perspective, is the company growing at a good rate? Is it financially stable? Is there a lot of upside? And with that, in turn, comes opportunities for career growth and advancement. So you want to be able to assess those two things, because I'm going to tell you, these two things right here are what grow your income and your wealth. If you can get in with a high growth company that's going places, they promote quickly, they don't have any kind of old school rules where you have to be in your position for 2 years before you can apply. I've seen that stuff before. That is the old school way of grooming talent. If you've got an A player, that person is ready to move up. There's no reason to hold them back. So you want to look for those kind of places that are a little bit more progressive when it comes to how they move talent within their company. And if you can do that, you can certainly advance your compensation, probably more so than just moving around every 1 to 2 years. Again, you want to look at the healthcare cost. What can you see your doctor? That's always important. Are you going to have to go out of network? So what kind of plans do they offer? What did those costs entail? And this is very important to understand. What does the employer pay versus what you have to pay out of your paycheck every paycheck period in the form of your premiums and your co-pays, deductibles, and so forth. Make sure you're comparing, contrasting. When you look at offer packages, especially if you've got more than one offer, you want to understand the difference in cost, but also the difference in the benefit. What are you going to get out of it? Can I see my doctor? So be sure to evaluate that. Short-term incentives, again, we've talked about that. Most companies will have either an annual bonus. It's typically a percentage tied to your salary, and it's usually measured on individual performance, hitting your goals and objectives, as well as the company. I've seen some companies do overall revenue, EBITDA. You know, sometimes they will break it down by department. So your job is to understand how that bonus is paid out. Ideally, if you can, a good question to ask when you get to the stage is, could you give me the historical payout of that bonus over the last 3 years for this position that I'm applying to? And if you hear numbers like, well, the last person only hit 70%, or the company wasn't doing so well, yeah, that should send up a bit of a red flag for you to at least further vet. You also want to understand, you know, if I'm given a bonus target of 20%, what if if I meet performance, do I get that 20? Do I get the full bonus? In other words, what if I exceed performance and deliver a lot of value to the company? Can I exceed that 100%? And I know plenty of companies sometimes will go up to where you can exceed 150% of your bonus target. So make sure you understand that. You also want to understand when that bonus is paid out. That can impact you in the future when you're negotiating an offer outside of the company. You want to understand when when that bonus is going to pay out. Long-term incentives. Now, this could probably be an entire webinar. I'm just going to give you the highlights here. Performance is measured over a longer period of time, and that's how the reward is administrated. And so typically what you'll find, and especially in public corporations, you know, at the lower level positions, you may get access to stock option grants. So, you know, if the stock is worth $20 on the day it's granted, that stock has to, you know, over the vesting period, whether it's 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, it has to grow in value for it to be worth anything to you. So that's very important to understand. Whereas restricted stock units, performance shares, and other types of long-term incentives, those are actually worth value when they are granted. And your goal, these are rewarded for employers that impact that value of that stock over a longer period of time. They're also a great tool for retaining employees. So rewarding is obviously important, but because they're stretched out over a vesting schedule, in other words, you can't just cash out the moment they're granted. You have to wait a period of time. It's also a good tool to help motivate and retain employees. This can be a very lucrative component of your compensation package, so you want to take this very seriously. Some of these are very complex. I've seen in smaller privately owned companies or private equity owned companies, they can get very complex. So if finance and personal investing is not an area of expertise, strongly recommend that you reach out to your financial planner and potentially your CPA so you can really understand what the package consists of, and especially what the potential value that can be realized if the company is growing and that equity is growing in return. So understand the type of incentive, when it's awarded, the vesting schedule, and especially the financial performance of the company. Now, no one has a crystal ball. We can't really see into the future. So, you're going to have to just take a look at the historical performance of the company, do some trend analysis for the industry. Is this industry on the up? Is it on the decline? And that can help you kind of maybe figure out. And I would run some what-if scenarios too. Okay, if the company performs at 3% growth, what does that mean? If the company is, 10%, 20% growth, that can kind of help you figure out what your potential earnings can be from the long-term incentive. As you evaluate the job offer, as we talked about earlier, you can have the best package in the world, but if the company is not a great company to work at, it's a moot point. You're not going to stay there long. So be sure to check out the company's reputation. I think Yelp and Glassdoor are great resources. But I would also just bear in mind that that people that tend to write bad reviews are disgruntled employees. So you have to look at this as a data point. I would encourage further vetting by, trying to reach out to peers, that are doing the same kind of work at the company. If you can, you got to be a little sensitive there. But it doesn't hurt to reach out. Hey, what's it like to work there? I'd love to hear kind of what the day in the life is at this company. But if you talk to former employees, they're probably going to be a little bit more vocal about their past employers. So that's another great way. And LinkedIn makes it very easy to identify those employees that you might want to connect with. Again, just remember that this is very important, as a great compensation package is completely useless if you're in an environment that you absolutely despise. Once you get all of these variables, then you want to start, calculating the earnings potential, understand any kind of gaps. We recommend that you put the offer data into Excel, run a few different what-if scenarios. Okay, what if I only hit, 75% of my bonus? What if I hit 100? What if I hit 125? And so forth. That way you can have some different data points. And then you want to put in your benefit costs. Again, compare and contrast what that long-term incentive, that short-term incentive, how can that impact your annual income, your W-2 income? How can that impact based on minimal performance up to, maximum exceeds performance? From there, you want to look at the benefits, the perks, the time off, whatever is important to you. If you need to go back to school, then tuition reimbursement should be an important factor to you. So you can put in a separate worksheet, lay out all of the different benefits, perks, and then try to assign a value, like 5 is most important, 1 is not that important. And that way you can analyze the non-cash compensation aspects of the position or the opportunity as well to help make a well-informed decision. And after that, nothing left to do except or decline, or you need to try to go and negotiate. That's what we're going to talk about next, negotiating the job offer. So before you get into a negotiation, again, preparation is always pertinent to getting into a negotiation. So you want to understand, if you're going to go back and ask for more money, it's critical that you can sell that employer on why you deserve more money or whatever, more of what you need. So be prepared to justify, the value that you're going to bring to that employer. How do you do that? Well, past performance. You could look at past accomplishments, what you've delivered. It's best to be able to quantify that value that you've delivered for past employers. Let's say you've saved the company $2 million through rebidding a contract with your contract manufacturers. So, you better be prepared to justify why you feel. You can't just say, hey, I need more money. That's not going to work. So understand the value you're going to bring to the organization. Hopefully you did that before you interviewed. That's why you got the offer, but be prepared to go through that scenario again. You certainly want to maintain a very positive attitude. Remember that the employer is just as interested in sealing the deal, getting you to the altar to say yes. So you don't want to come across as needy, greedy, have a bad attitude, negative. Maintain positive attitude, and that can certainly help push things in the right direction. You always want to understand, if they can't get me to the salary point, what are my other negotiation tactics? You should have a plan A for salary, a plan B that might address some other things. That could be additional paid time off. We just did an offer last week where candidate needed to come in a little bit above their range. It was only $2,500. The CEO said, hey, you know what? I'd prefer to stay here at this number. Let the candidate know I would definitely be willing to do a mid-year salary review. And so candidate took that into consideration, came back and said, hey, I really need to maintain my lifestyle, blah, blah, blah. Here's the value I've delivered, had all those answers, and was pretty easy to get the CEO to bump it up to where he needed to be. But in that case, know what else you need to negotiate, because there could be a long list of things. You could say, okay, well, I know you've offered 3 weeks. I really need to be at 4 weeks of vacation. Can you make that happen? So strive for the win-win. Don't just go in thinking that salary is all I need to negotiate. Be prepared to have a list of things that and rank those in most important, least important. That's where you want to start. If you can't get to where you need to be, then your best bet at this point is to set the stage for future negotiations. And you want to do this in writing. What do I need to do in the first 6 months to earn an increase and get back to where I need to be, or in the first 12 months? And if you can hit certain objectives, make sure they've got that spelled out in writing, which you can expect to receive in terms of future negotiations. If you've got multiple offers in hand, let's say, instead of, if they're all comparable, a lot of people tend to go with the highest offer, and a lot of times that can be a big mistake. Going back to, wealth, increasing your wealth and really putting yourself in a place to advance and accelerate your career, you've got to look at that aspect of the opportunity first and foremost. Sometimes it's okay to take a small step back to make a giant leap forward. So always bear that in mind. Look for the opportunities with high growth. If you're talking just a few $1,000s, just make sure you can live without that. But always focus on the high growth opportunities, and never put yourself into a position if you've got 2 or 3 different offers where you're bidding. Sometimes if you go back and forth, well, this company's offering me this, you need to match this. It's going to send that me, it's all about me attitude. And I've seen companies, renege on offers just because of that tactic. So you don't want to get into this, bidding war between different companies and offers. If they say no, try to find out what the factors were, and if it's something that you can overcome through an objection, that's something that you can always try to focus on. Again, try to negotiate a future outcome that can get you to where you need to be. And you also need to be prepared if you're not able to get to where you need to be. Don't just make a decision because you either you have to have a job, you need a job. With this kind of economy right now, you need to put yourself into a position to where you're making the best decision for you and your family. So be prepared to say no yourself. Now, I'm just going to kind of go through some quick recap on when you're in a negotiation situation, what you want to strive to do. Absolutely research average salaries. Research the company, make sure there's good opportunity for growth. They have a good reputation in the marketplace. Try to withhold salary until you fully understand more attributes of not just the position and the company, but also the other offer package variables. Sometimes companies can have really, really strong, healthcare benefits, vacation, things like that, that might be, that might have a good value for you in the long term. A good quality of life factor as well. You want to make sure that the compensation is fair. It's within your desired range. Keep an open mind when you're evaluating an offer. Be aware of your strengths and accomplishments so you can demonstrate that value when you get into the negotiation stages. You want to be open-minded. You want to be realistic. It's okay to aim high when you're giving them your desired compensation because it's easier to negotiate down. It's always hard to negotiate back up. So if you give them a kind of a little bit right above what where you really need to be at, that makes it a little bit easier. But keep it realistic. Make sure you understand that there's other aspects of the offer package in addition to the base salary. Always thank the employer for when the offer is made. You want to think about the opportunity from a long-term perspective, not just the short-term gain. Understand other attributes of the package that you can negotiate. Sometimes you can get a sign-on bonus, a shorter review period, and so forth. Just mentioned this earlier. Aim a little bit high, easier to come back down than go back up. Be honest when you're talking about your compensation needs. And if you choose to decline, you make sure you're contacting the employer to do so verbally instead of doing that through email. And you never want to ghost an employer on an offer. I've seen that happen before. Not a good thing to do. As far as what not to do, you don't want to get into negotiating right after an offer is made. Always take the time to thoroughly evaluate and vet the offer. You don't want to accept an offer strictly for the money. Make sure the opportunity for growth is there and it's a good company culture, good boss. Don't want to get into a bidding war. You don't want to accept an offer ever without seeing everything in writing. Make sure you've got a signed offer letter as well. Make sure it's legitimate. And on that note, you want to make sure you clear drug test and a background check as well. before giving your notice. That's always important to do. Submitting your resignation, again, you shouldn't do that until you've cleared everything. You certainly don't want to inflate your current earnings. That can come back to haunt you, and so never do that. You don't want to get overly aggressive and assertive when it comes to negotiations. Don't just accept the first offer that comes along. If it's the right fit, go for it, but make sure you're comfortable when it comes to the other attributes. Don't want to seem like you're too needy as well, so don't just be too eager to accept. Make sure you thoroughly evaluate, even if the offer comes in above what you expected, and never let an employer rush you into accepting an offer. You should have at least a couple of days, if not, 2, 3, 4, 5 days to thoroughly evaluate and think things through. Counteroffers, put in your resignation. The company comes back and says, "Hey, we've made a mistake. We're gonna offer you more money. We really don't want to see you go." So what's going on in their mind? Number one is they're panicking because you're probably going to put them in a bind. You're going to hit them out of the blue. They're going to start questioning, well, what did we do wrong? Or what did we not do that led to your resignation? They're going to start thinking about all the time and the cost involved with hiring a replacement, training, get that person up to speed. And then after that, once the reality is settled in, then they're going to start thinking about questioning your loyalty. And this is very important. If there's a promotion that comes into play, you could get passed on if they're going to go back and remember, well, he was getting ready to leave us. If there's a layoff, guess who might be the first person that gets laid off? So just keep those variables in mind when you get the counteroffer. Don't make an immediate decision unless you're ready to move on. Things to think about is the company biding time until they can find a replacement? I mean, it's hard to figure out. You got to use your intuition there. Am I going to lose their trust? Is this going to impact my career going forward? Will I burn a bridge at that other employer where I've kind of said yes, and now I'm saying no? I'm going to go back and renege. You don't want to burn any bridges. They may not look at you ever again for employment. And then think about, what led me to look to begin with. That's always important. Was it a bad boss? Are they going to put me under someone else that I can work for? I mean, there's always issues that lead to this for people leaving, and if they can fix that, then you're good to go. Will the counteroffer solve all these problems is what you want to find out. Will the employer honor their word? Are they going to give you that higher salary or more time off? Again, you want to get those things in writing if you ever do accept. Get it in writing and to make sure you have a good plan and a good framework going forward that addresses all of your past concerns. Final thoughts. Every time you change jobs, it can be a major life-changing event. So remember that. Very serious when you're looking at offer. You want to not just look at the salary, but everything else involved. Always conduct the proper research and preparation. This is the key, especially when it comes to evaluating and negotiating an offer. Look at the long-term factors over short-term. Remember, internal promotions in a high-growth company is the greatest way to impact your pay than changing jobs frequently. Never accept a position just because of the salary being higher. Always keep an open mind, positive attitude, and remember sometimes it does make sense to take a small, maybe it's a small increase or even a decrease if there is a significant upside that allows you to take a giant leap forward. All right, and that's it. Time for Q&A.
Thank you, Rodney. That was fantastic. So I'll give you all a moment to type up your questions. We're almost out of time, so I'll only be able to take one or two. But real quick, I wanted to remind everyone to visit apics.org/career resources. We actually launched our own supply chain compensation salary calculator in 2018, so you can view that there and see how you compare. And we also have our job board and our mentor center. So wonderful resources available to our members. So first question is about signing bonuses. Do you see these more frequently at higher or lower levels of responsibility?
Great question. So every company is different in how they view sign-on bonuses. Some will actually use the sign-on bonus as a tool, as an incentive to get people to accept. They look at it as an above and beyond tactic that maybe other employers aren't using. A lot of employers will look at them also as if they can't get to a certain number. In order to close that gap, oftentimes we'll see a sign-on bonus. Sometimes that sign-on bonus is offered on the front end. And then some companies will split the sign-on bonus. Okay, I'll give you half now. I'll give you half, 6 months from now or a year from now. I've seen it both ways. So just know that it's in this. You'll typically see it also in highly competitive environments, meaning economies, tightening labor markets. People right now are poaching talent in supply chain. There's for a lot of roles in supply chain, there's way more jobs than there are candidates. So absolutely, companies are right now, it's a candidate-driven market. So, you're definitely going to see sign-on bonus more so in these types of situations. Now, if you reverse this, go back to 2008, you're probably not going to see it as often.
Okay, great. Do you have any insight as to the average typical 401k matching percentage? What's high or low in your experience?
Yeah, great question. I think most plans, legally you have to do a 3% match is what I know even here at our company, we've got a simple IRA, and we do a 3% match. I would say that's what you'll find at a bare minimum. I've seen employer matches as high as 8, 10%. I'd say on average, somewhere probably between 4 and 6% though.
Okay.
And you absolutely want to contribute the minimal amount to get that full match. So if they do a 3% match, at least contribute 3%. If it's 5%, try to do 5%. Otherwise, you're turning down free money.
Excellent advice. So this is probably our last question here. If a company comes in with a low offer, somewhere in the 20 to 25% of the average, would this be a red flag even if they come back and bump it up a little bit?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. And I think it comes back to knowing your worth in the marketplace, because you've got to come in knowing at that minimum number where you want to be. And so anytime an employer comes in low, they better offer an explanation as to why they're doing that. Otherwise, they know where you need to be and they're choosing to come in lower. So they should be able to back that up with, hey, if we bring you in this high, you're going to be higher than other people that we're paying to do the same type of work. So you need to try to figure out that motivational factor. Sometimes there's a good reason for doing it. If you do feel like you're being lowballed, they can get there. Let's say you're working through a recruiter. They told you, well, this is the range, and they still come in low. And if they can't give you a good reason why they're doing that, why they came in below where you needed to be, then that should send up a red flag for sure.
Great. I'm actually going to squeeze in one more question. So let's say an employee does some research and finds out that the salary is below the market range, and management is aware of this but doesn't want to do anything about it. What steps should this person take?
So if you're underpaid in the position that you're in now, right? That's the question.
Right. Yeah.
How to address that? Yeah. And well, I think in this kind of situation, it's a delicate situation, obviously. If your manager refuses to do anything about it, your next best bet is to go to human resources. But you need to have some really good data to back up your claim. And so as long as you've got good data and you can go in and say, hey, and I've seen this happen, many times. There are certain fields that are on fire right now. You see this a lot in IT, and so I think what won't happen is if you don't bring it forward, nothing's going to happen, right? So I think in your mind, you need to go in with the data, and you need to, if your boss can't do anything, your next best bet is to go to human resources and just say, hey, I'm highly underpaid for the work I'm doing. I really feel like I need to be at this position. Can we have an open-ended discussion? What would it take to get back in line with with the current market pay, and just and then shut up. Don't and let that person talk and address your question, and then see if you can put a plan in place for moving forward. Now, ideally, let us do some research on our end. I've seen companies, even recently, companies that have made the news that have gone out and have done market pay analysis, and then all of a sudden, raised their salaries for people that were paid below market pay. That's a great employer. But at the end of the day, if you know you're underpaid and you're worth a lot more in the marketplace, only you as the employee can make that final determination. Hey, if my employer is not going to get me to where I need to be, I know there's better opportunities out there. I'm not growing in my position. I'm not getting those chances to get promoted. I mean, only you, the employee, can make that determination if you want to start looking outside.
Excellent. Thank you, Rodney. And that is all the time we have for today. So I'd like to thank our speaker, Rodney Apple, for his time today, and to all of our attendees for participating. We hope that you found this webinar to be beneficial. Please be sure to keep an eye out for future webinars on the online events page of the APICS website. This concludes today's webinar. Have a nice day.